Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and I'm thrilled today to have Dr. Charlie McCormick, the president of Schreiner University. Dr. McCormick, first of all, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Thank you, Tom. It's a delight and an honor for me to be on your podcast.
I'm a professor's kid, so I'm always interested in the academic life, and I was really interested in your academic background. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Tom, I grew up in Snyder, Texas, and we have a junior college there called Western Texas College. But I remember graduating from high school, and we had a couple of students that were intending to go to college and a lot more that weren't. My mom and dad were very insistent that I was going to go to college. And so I went to Abilene Christian University in Abilene. Wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do, where I was going, but I decided to become an English major, which I don't think was exactly what my parents had planned for me at the time. But I'd always been a big reader, and I enjoyed that. And at some point before I graduated, and I'm a little embarrassed to tell this story, I'll tell you anyway, that I had a professor in the English department. And I was complaining to him one day, and I've tried to go back and understand what my motivation was. Maybe I was trying to get him to feel sorry for me, I'm not sure. But I told him I wish I had grown up in a place that was more literate, so I didn't have to do so much catch-up work in terms of books I was reading and things like that. And he didn't say he felt sorry for me. He looked at me straight in the eye and he said, "You did grow up in a very literate place. They just told stories instead of writing them down." And for me, that was one of those epiphanies that a person has. And I knew he was right the moment he said it. And that's really what caused me to pursue the academic path I did. I went to graduate school at A&M and studied anthropology, and there I studied stories people told. And then I went to the University of Pennsylvania for my PhD work in folklore and folklife, and continued to study the stories, the performances, the things of everyday life that are just embedded with all sorts of meaning that we know are embedded with meaning, but are often invisible to us for a variety of reasons.
What did you write your dissertation on?
Another thing my parents were a little confused about. In Snyder, I spent my time on Friday and Saturday nights, what we called cruising, making the drag is what we called it. So we would drive around Sonic on one side and down to Bar H Bar parking lot on the other, and we'd make that imperfect loop 20 or 30 times a night. And after I got into this area of folklore and folklife, I began to wonder, why in the world did we do that? And just a passing interest in, were we the only people in the world that did that, or were other people doing it? And of course what I discovered is a whole lot of people did it. And so I ended up really writing about the birth and the death of great American tradition, because even by the time I was in high school, the final bells of cruising the Strip were beginning to toll. And it would only be a few more years before it just became demonized, criminalized, or just didn't happen anymore.
Let's move to your current role now, which is the president of Schreiner University. We are in February of 2023. Pretty important year for Schreiner University. So could you tell us a little bit about the history of Schreiner University?
Yeah, I will. And I'll share with you, too, there's a lot of things we don't know about the early history. We're all aware that when Charles Schreiner came over here with his parents, we know that his parents passed away pretty quickly once they got here. I can only imagine what he must have thought as a teenager who probably didn't want to have to come over here in the first place. And he tried his hand at a lot of things. But as I look back on his life and I try to understand what led him to found this school, he had what appeared to me to be, and this is my language, I've never read this anywhere, a sort of civilizing agenda. Because this part of the world was pretty rough and woolly when he lived over here. And he started a banking empire and a retail empire and farming and ranching. And as he got to the end of his life, he wanted to start this school. He'd never had any experience doing that before, and so he reached out to the Presbytery of Western Texas because he knew that the Presbyterian Church had started plenty of schools. And he had some family connections there as well. And what they really wanted was a place for their summer encampment. And they wanted it right down here at Quinlan Creek. And in fact, the Robbins Lewis Pavilion and the Trailhead are still some architectural remnants of that time. He didn't appear to be that crazy about doing that, but if it got him to school, he was willing to do it. But he had to keep coming back and saying, "Remember that school you're going to help me with, remember that." And of course, Westminster Encampment would go on to become Mo Ranch in about 1950. And And finally, in about 1914, they all were able to be in agreement about the land and the early endowment that Charles Schreiner was giving them. And World War I got in the... But it looked like part of Charles Schreiner's motivation was that he knew there were a whole bunch of kids who lived out in the country around here. We already had Tybee High School at that time. There are a lot of kids who lived out in the country. There simply weren't enough hours in the day for those kids to leave home, come to school, and go back at night. So they needed a place to go and return home at the end of the week or maybe at the end of the term. And Schreiner Institute, as it was called at that time, served just that purpose for high school age boys.
So I grew up in a little bit bigger town in Texas than you did, but we still called it a small town, which was Bryan.
Okay, sure.
And the academic environment obviously was Texas A&M, but it was in many ways a small town's kid's school.
Yeah.
And my father really emphasized to me the democratic, as in little d, nature of public education, particularly in the state of Texas. And when I came to Schreiner and heard about the tradition and history, I saw that in action. I saw the farm boys coming in from the hill country, and as Schreiner University moved forward, I still see it today. Would that be a fair assessment?
It's very much a fair assessment. And Tom, a lot of people forget that higher education is at its most fundamental level a local or a regional enterprise. And there are some schools that doesn't really apply to, Rice, a Harvard, a Stanford. People are traveling around the world to go to those places. But a place like Schreiner and thousands of others like us, they are serving students that are their neighbors. There was a big company that did a national study to see how far on average did a student travel from their home to the college or university they attended. 51 miles, they concluded. And I remember telling our vice president for enrollment, that's not true here. And he went out and he did the analysis, and I was correct. It was 52 miles for Schreiner. It's easy to forget that these are really local and regional enterprises, and who we're educating are our neighbors. That's still true.
So let's move forward to Schreiner in 2023. And if I could ask you, what are, in your opinion, some of the top academic areas of Schreiner?
Yeah, let me maybe answer that by giving a little historical context also. I think one of the things that Schreiner has been good at, very good at, but it's also in terms of the history of higher education, is adapting and changing over time. So we went high school for boys, dropped the military, women came here, it was a 2-year college, and a 4-year university. Same way I think we've had academic programs that have reflected the moments that we were in. And so the stories are really legendary now about the mathematics, the English, the engineering, early on in Schreiner's history. I don't know if the story is true, but some of the old-timers who come back love to tell us that Schreiner was the only school that Rice would accept into its engineering program as an engineering major. Again, I have no idea if that's true or not, but that sort of reflects the legendary nature of those stories. More recently, I think we've also been able to reflect some of the trends and the moments and the relevancy of the time. Education, graphic design, those were important programs when I first got here. As we're in 2023 and we look ahead to a few years, the emerging programs that seem to be most important, most relevant, which students are enrolling in, things like nursing, engineering, and we're going to have agricultural tech and natural resources management program we'll be launching in about another year. I anticipate that will be fully subscribed, and we think aviation is going to be a very big program for us also, which will start next fall.
You became president, I believe, in 2017.
January of 2017, yes.
So what would you say are 2 or 3 of the initiatives you've been able to bring forward since that time?
It's interesting, Tom, because in the world of higher education, as you probably know, there's not a lot of internal succession plans. So it's infrequent for something, from my experience, to have happened, where I went from a provost to a president at the same institution. Usually there's some sort of transition in there. And so I think it's true, though nobody ever really told me this, I think it's true that I was always seen as an evolutionary president rather than a revolutionary. I think our board and our faculty and our staff and our students liked the direction the institution was going in. and they wanted it to continue in that direction. Nothing needed to be saved or things like that. When I think about what we've accomplished since I've been president, it's really within this evolutionary box. Long before I got here, there was a strong commitment to affordability and how do we make sure that the students who want to come to school here can. We've been able to refine that over the last couple of years, and so now we have a locked-in tuition. Whatever your tuition rate is when you're a freshman, that's going to be the same tuition rate you have when you're a senior. We've also said that we're going to make our tuition inclusive of all fees. We used to have students pay their tuition bill, and then a week later they went to class and got the syllabus and realized, whoops, I got to get several $100s or maybe more of books for the classroom. All that's bundled together now, so it's a one fee. It's a one price, I should say. And that doesn't solve all the affordability problems, but what it does is it lets students and their families really understand here's what the cost is going to be. And then they can decide, is this something we're going to be able to put together or not? So that's one of the things we've continued on. Another evolutionary piece is that my predecessor, Dr. Summerlin, he was really concerned, thought it was important that we took seriously issues of what he would call vocation. What's the meaning in life? What are we here for? And we've done a variety of work with students on that issue, but I had an opportunity to start something that we've called the Eddington Society. So it's named after Andy Eddington, our second president here. And Andy was a guy, I never met him, but he clearly walked the walk and didn't just talk the talk. And this is an opportunity for faculty and staff to get together over the course of a year and explore ways in which this isn't just a job, but that this is a calling. And we're not trying to over-romanticize that idea, but we're also not trying to just see ourselves as automatons who go through the day mindlessly. That we can be intentional and deliberate, and we can make a lot of choices in the sort of life we want to. So that sort of vocation work continues. And then for me, we've had a long commitment to supporting students who are interested in the military. Schreiner started off as a high school in the military tradition. We've had a program on campus that was very concerned with getting students into military academies. And we've really been able to grow all of that into a more comprehensive program where we're still interested in helping students get into military academies if that's what they want, but also very interested in having an ROTC program that students can use as a launching pad for a career in the military and their own personal development. And then serving our veteran students too, which both live in this community and sometimes come to this community just to attend Schreiner University.
You had a lot of exciting announcements last year about the future of Schreiner. Focus on two. One was you announced the football team would be established. But I have to say the one that fired me up was the banking.
Okay.
And I admit I'm a geek. But I just thought that was brilliant. Rather than have a finance degree or an economics degree or one of the other typical entry points into banking, something that would really focus on banking, because in many ways financial institutions are the backbone of the U.S. and indeed the world economy. So I was wondering if I could ask, what was the genesis of that program and where do you hope to take it?
I'd like to be able to tell you that I was just brilliant, came up with that all on my own, but it won't surprise you to know that's not the story. We were actually approached by a group of regional bankers around here who told us that there existed a lot of very fine banking programs in this state. Texas Tech has one, A&M has one. I think Texas State has a very fine banking program. But the focus, the recruitment didn't really concentrate on some of the things they were most concerned about, which was, what's the future of rural banking going to be? And Tom, I'm not entirely crazy about saying I'm just going to duplicate programs for the sake of duplicating them. So if there's a way in which we can do something different or unique that complements what already exists in the world of higher education, I'm interested in that. And so this notion of a focus on rural banking was very attractive to me. Part of that is because of this local commitment and local focus I've talked about. And we've really had a rural initiative that we've been leaning into. You've got all sorts of options about where you want to go to college. If you head east of here, you don't have that many if you head west of here until you get to Alpine or El Paso. So we got a particular focus. We've been spending a lot of time in these communities and talking to these families and the businesses there. And this really seemed to be a great opportunity to both serve the needs of rural bankers and at the same time provide a real pathway for families and students to say, I love the community I lived in. Now I see a path for how to either be in this community or one like it that can sustain myself and my family over time.
I believe this is the 100th anniversary of the founding of Schreiner. I was wondering if you could highlight a couple of the celebrations you hope to be involved in this year.
Yeah, we just finished our Centennial musical with Playhouse 2000 at the Callow, Me and Juliet. I saw it for the first time on Sunday. I think it was its last show, but it was just fantastic. We've got a big athletics banquet coming up on April the 29th where we're going to unveil our Centennial team. I won't take away their thunder and share everybody with you, but it probably won't surprise anyone to know that among those team members are Raymond Berry, Hall of Famer who was a Schreiner student, and Charlie Johnson, one of the great quarterbacks in the NFL, and also has a PhD in engineering, I believe.
From Rice.
That's right. Yeah, he had quite a career. So that's coming up. We're going to run a program this summer that is an echo of the old Westminster encampment here. We're going to invite people who want to spend a couple of days on campus to come live in the residence halls, to do some fun classes, get to experience campus life again. We're going to have a military ball next November on Veterans Day. We're going to have a wonderful women's leadership conference focused on the women of Schreiner in October. And we're going to partner with the Museum of Western Art to look at both some of the art collection and a variety of other treasures from Schreiner University in November and December. But the highlight will be on September 18th, which is our actual 100th celebration. And the Symphony of the Hills will be here on our front lawn. They're going to not only perform some extraordinary music, but also a piece that's called the Schreiner Opus, which was a piece that was commissioned for Schreiner University on the occasion of its 100th. So it's going to be great fun. We invite everybody to come out, and there are going to be a lot of other things going on, too, that you can go to our website and see those.
Schreiner, over its history, has had a unique role in Kerrville and the Hill Country, and each sort of point in time seemed to be appropriate for that point in time. But it seems to me here in 2023, as we look forward to, dare I say, mid-century in 2030, Schreiner's even more important than ever. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts might be on that.
It won't surprise you to know I absolutely agree with you, Tom. And important for several reasons. One of the things that I think the best colleges and universities do, and that we try to do here every day, is both to transcend in time, the time and space that we're in, and to be of the time and space. That you've got some schools and that have the moniker liberal arts education or liberal arts school, and a lot of people apply that to Schreiner too. And what that speaks to is this Greek idea that for the liberated person to remain liberated and not become enslaved by someone else, there were certain habits of mind and skills and dispositions that you had to cultivate. And we still care a lot about those things today. We want our students to be critical thinkers and analytic problem solvers. But we also want them to understand the world in which they live in right now, and a world that's changing at such a rapid pace that it's hard to predict what the future is going to be. And so we want them to have skills and knowledge and experiences that allow them to not just survive in this environment, but thrive in that environment. So that's one of the really important things I think we're trying to accomplish. And then we know that this hill country is going to grow and develop. It takes me several minutes to get across a G Street bridge. It's at 2 minutes and 15 seconds instead of 2 minutes. But that's going to continue to happen. And we want to help be here to provide workforce and the cultural and the economic opportunities that will continue to make this area one of the most exciting places to live in the state, maybe in the nation.
Dr. McCormick, we're near the end of our time for this podcast, and I wanted to thank you for taking the time to visit with me, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you very much, Tom.